Despite the massive amounts of damage characters in the game, there's always a group of heroes that shine above the rest. It's time for the DPS tier list for Season 6.5. Let's get right into the worst of the worst, and unlike the support tier list, there's a couple completely helpless DPS heroes at the bottom that require a lot of luck and skill to win games, and even so can still easily lose with a single mistake. Despite the clear hierarchy in which DPS are good and which DPS aren't, you can look to get good at whichever hero you want by checking out the link in the description for a GameLeap membership. Especially the Ashe guide is really thorough. And spoiler alert, Ashe is pretty good right now. She's definitely in the middle of the pack. So check out the GameLeap website to get a deeper dive on the top heroes. Okay, here we go, worst of the worst. In F tier, the poor shotgun merchant Reaper. Reaper is supposed to be the tank buster, the guy who blows up the tank or chases them away every time. But the tank roster has been bolstered not only in heroes but in reworks, meaning Reaper is often not able to fulfill his base role of marking and pressuring the enemy tank. The only tanks who realistically struggle against Reaper are Winston and Ryan, but when Reaper isn't even the best option to these two, outshined by heroes who can not only delete them both in a second but also keep playing for their own neutral, it's hard to find a reason to pick him over any other character. He's best played on close quarters maps, but specifically ones with a lot of corners and flank routes, so if you do get countered by long-range heroes, you at least have options to try to win instead of running it down mid in the Valley of Death. Significantly stronger but still situational is Sombra. Sombra is a difficult hero to play well, and half of her strength comes from being able to communicate properly. In ranked, this is really rare. Even when Sombra was really strong in Overwatch League, she wasn't that prominent in ranked. Know that if you want to make her work, all you need is to call out who you're gonna hack, and then do it. It's as simple as that, at least getting started. But even so, you'll have to play uphill against stacked S tier support lines with Bab, Brig, and Larry. Not to mention even Kiriko, who can cleanse every hack without much thought. Sombra is good, but the ult charge nerf makes it a lot harder to consistently win important fights as a solo player. The classic strategy that is step 1, build ultimate, step 2, use ultimate, isn't as present in the game as it was before. The reason Sombra is still significantly better than Reaper is that she is still a great tool to counter certain enemy heroes. This is best suited for Doom, Lucio, and Genji, so whenever any of these most wanted wreak havoc in your backline, a defensive Sombra can do the trick. Now onto the big groups in C and B. Starting with the worst in C, we have Rocket Queen Pharah. Now, Pharah is insane, right? Even with Baptiste and Larry zoning the skies, she can still rock hard with a Mercy Pocket. But that's precisely why she isn't higher on the tier list. Without a Mercy, Pharah becomes weak in the knees and can't sustain herself when trading poke damage to neutral. With ultimates, that changes. But a hero that can't even be present in the slow, easy part of the fight without being 40 meters away isn't amazing. She's more consistent than Sombra because the Pharah will often force a reaction from the enemy team, a counterpick. But Sombra struggles against even just normal, decent support lines, not to mention the better ones. And Reaper, obviously, even with a Lucio comp, will struggle against a certain invincible robot frontline machine. Next up is Mei, who despite getting some decent buffs is, just like Reaper, struggling against the strong tanks right now. The top 3 of Orisa, Zarya, and Queen all have options to escape her slow and also her blizzard. Zarya and Queen can also help their allies do so as well, meaning you'll have to find more value with your neutral of walling enemies off to split them, or spamming with your icicles. Luckily, your icicles are good enough spam, especially with headshots, to make up for unfavorable matchups. But these unfavorable matchups are pretty often, and with a lot of damage being added to the game recently, with Larry making spam comps seriously strong, your ice walls won't even stay up for very long. Now for Tracer in the middle of C tier. Tracer's skill ceiling means you can always win games with a good team and good coordination, but since Overwatch 2 was released almost a year ago, there's been a lot of changes that make Tracer a lot harder to play. Just the fact that all 3 of the Overwatch 2 launch heroes have good matchups into Tracer means a lot, especially Kiriko, who despite losing her headshot melee combo, still has a chance to 2-tap you with a headshot and a body shot. Tracer's natural counters ever since Overwatch 1 have also been buffed, like Cassidy and Torb, so finding a matchup that works for Tracer is pretty iffy. She's still a great character, and every hero from now onwards definitely has a favorable matchup often enough, but there's a lot of better characters that can get more damage done, while dying less without having to play perfectly, dodging kunais and all sorts of grenades, and hitting every pulse bomb. The bar is pretty high for how much you have to do. But don't be dissuaded, the struggle that is playing Tracer into all our counters is worth it, since with enough experience you can manage it and come out on top. Right next to Tracer is another high skill ceiling character, but all focused in the aim department, Widowmaker. Positioning is obviously really important as well, but if you want to play Widowmaker and win, you have to be holding the lobby hostage. This is difficult not only because she has very few favorable maps, like Havana, Circuit, and Ilios Ruins, but every fight you're on a timer to hit some headshots to make up for the damage you're not dealing consistently. Not just the front line, but overall. With less divers being played, especially Sombra Tracer, you'll be able to play unpressured more often, and can actually help your team a lot with some key headshots on the enemy tank, who I guarantee is not used to being focused by Widow. Throw them a fat stack of 300 damage every once in a while, and your job is done. Widow is always a difficult hero to rank, since she's the pinnacle of the hit or miss character, literally. But like always, with enough practice you can overcome the weaknesses of your hero, even more so than Tracer. At the top of rank C for Cassidy, we finally have our first real consistent Joe shooting guy. Pointing and clicking is the game, and with 225 HP, until Blizzard decides to swap it up again, while he doesn't spam as much as Pharah, he doesn't need any other heroes to help him click heads. It's good that he's not too strong right now, since his hindering grenade has the potential to be really irritating and annoying to play against. For now, he's mostly outclassed by other long-range hit scans, since his small but situational damage fall-off nerf means he loses a lot of duels past his fall-off range. On some maps against characters like Ashe or Soldier, he can't win the late fight duels on his own, which is a massive disadvantage when you're looking to close out fights. His hindering grenade is still perfect and unique as a counter dive utility, so make sure not throw it out across the map if the enemy team is looking swift with their engages. And now for B tier, only heavy hitters left. And the hottest take I have is Junkrat at the bottom of B tier. Junkrat has always had a bit of a reputation as a troll pick, but to defend my honor, I have to remind everyone that we have all played games against an unstoppable Junkrat player. Junkrat is only held back by the fear of the masses. The average player is too scared to wield his power. But speaking factually, as a spam character in spam meta, he's not the hottest, but he's definitely heated up. His trap is like it's ever been, amazing or cosmetic. But with smart concussion mine usage, high speed mobility and one-shots are at your fingertips. Just like Cassidy, he doesn't need any team support to get his job done. And on top of that, his control of choke points is still uncontested, especially the smaller chokes get. He's simply the best at it. He may be more counterable than everyone else above him, but he still deserves a spot in B tier for the chaos and raw damage output he brings to the game. And chaos is definitely your friend in Overwatch 2. Next up is Hanzo, who toes the line between high skill ceiling and consistent easy damage. His utility is also pretty versatile, not too oppressive, but always good for both you and your team. With good enough aim, getting picks comes often, and with consistent shield break and storm arrows to keep tanks at bay, he's a solid all-rounder. He doesn't really have counters, but he's definitely weak to being focused down as a dive target. You can deal with this with good sonic arrow usage, so you can position and time your escape better with more information on the enemy team. Dragon Strike is also situational, but playing it more reactively, shooting the dragons after the enemy team rotates aggressively, or uses an ultimate to walk forward, makes it a lot more reliable, and makes Hanzo seem a bit more viable. The second flyer in Overwatch, Echo, is faring a lot better than her primitive predecessor, Pharah. She's always been a strong hero, with insane spam and burst damage on release, and the most versatile ultimate in the game, since it is basically every ultimate in the game. Well, at least out of the 5 enemy heroes at any given time. But the point is that she has always been the ranked hero to climb with. Tank killer, one-shots on backline, a second life ultimate, so why isn't she higher? Despite being able to keep up with the high damage output right now, and even having a better time than Reaper at killing tanks, her big hitbox and flight mobility gets really punished by the hitscan duo of Baptiste and Larry. And there's still 2 whole DPS slots to fit in a 3rd or 4th hitscan. I can't believe Pharah is still sometimes playable. But even though Echo gets really zoned and cornered by these characters, she can still use the burst damage part of her kit to great success, and duplicating the other overpowered characters in the game isn't a bad idea at all. Closing in at the top of B tier is Ashe, who with a recent buff has really solidified herself as a pick that is good in any situation. Her weaknesses are really few, and learning to weave in your hipfires after scope shots for even more burst damage will really up your game. Ashe is definitely an all-rounder, but she loses out in some specific pretty impactful areas, the first being in the DPS matchup. Her head is massive. Her head hitbox, that is, leading to her losing even duels against other mid-rangers, and especially snipers. This is definitely circumventable, but still a drawback. The other difference is her long cooldowns, so when you get into better lobbies, teams that are able to soft dive or soft engage, forcing cooldowns before going in, will get a lot more value against Ashe. And even Coach Gun isn't enough to escape most dive engages. Just remember to switch up your position a lot to make up for these 2 weaknesses, to avoid being scouted and marked for death, and to take advantageous duels where you shoot first. Crowning B tier is the queen herself, Symmetra, and her beam is stronger than ever. 2 seconds shooting in close range, and she's got Echo's focusing beam. Long range, and she's shooting Helix rockets every second. As a specialist hero, she's always been good at helping rush comps close distance, but she's in such a good state right now. High poke and burst damage and a beefy stat line of 225 HP, including shields, makes her playable in every non-dive comp. And even then, she can still be a nuisance. And the one thing that's been keeping her down, Echo and Pharah, are both marked heavily by the big bad supports on the block. Remember to not get stuck on only shooting tanks, since Symmetra is way more flexible than she seems. Don't let all the sim doubters get you confused. Her self-healing on shields is okay. It makes her even better against shields, but at this point, she's got so many advantages in the front line, you need to start practicing and playing her more. And because of her low pick rate, she's not going to be nerfed anytime soon. Now for the final frontier. Good in almost every situation, and luckily, Genji is in a strong spot right now. The game may not be in the best state with the mid-season patch not really affecting the strength of Orisa, but the slow brawl that comes with sturdy frontline tanks means Genji can get a lot of value not only in flanking, but also in fighting frontline with Deflect. Genji's got great synergy with Zarya and Queen too, so make sure to get some help from your tanks to time your pushes effectively. Remember to regularly rotate between diving and pushing and spamming out the front line, staying active all the time. Genji earns a spot in A tier because he's not only a strong character in the popular brawly comps, but he also can flex between focus firing with his team and punishing isolated targets. The rest of the top DPS all lay down heavy spam damage, and though they all have some form of ability, they don't come close to touching Genji. Playing Genji alongside any of the top 4 DPS, even the S tier, will make for an all-encompassing DPS line. Soldier 76 is up next for another wholesome, non-cringe hero at the top. His numbers get tuned every once in a while, and now he's once again in a good spot. Solid damage numbers on both his primary fire and his helix rockets makes him both a great duelist and a great spammer. But what really sets him apart is his ability to flank. Soldier flanks are famous, but have fallen a bit out of fashion. Balance your time between the front line and on the flanks, with more time spent flanking and taking off angles. And by off angles, I don't mean a little further to the right of main. I mean it's time to jog around the map looking for a big opening. Soldier's damage is great, but he also is incredibly fast at switching his angles, and on no cooldown whatsoever. His legs are his movement ability, so make sure you use them to the fullest. But the best A tier spot goes to Sojourn, largely due to her super strong mobility with her slide. When spamming and looking for snipes, Sojourn has a massive advantage over other heroes, since she can extend much further because of how fast her slide is. Even when you're playing defensively, any diving DPS or engaging tanks are easy to slip away from, and then split off from yourself with your disruptive shot. In the spam meta, Sojourn easily gets charged, and then it's all about hitting your railgun shots. Her tank damage is pretty devastating, especially against Queen, who usually is hardy when it comes to abusing her skinnier hitbox. Although Soldier is better at moving between flanks, Sojourn trades space a lot better. Where Soldier has to switch a lot of positions to not get caught, Sojourn can sustain one angle until there's nobody left peeking. Overclock is also really difficult to kite away from, so using it while your team is running in is perfect to force a reaction from the enemy team, fight and lose, or get slowly staggered. Finally, the big two who go hand in hand, Torbjorn and Bastion. This lore duo is so good across all ranks alike, and with only an eeny meeny super tiny nerf to Bastion, they're gonna be this way until Season 7. First off, both of their passive poke have been buffed, slowly but surely becoming a little bit too much to bear. Torb's fire rate is still insane, and if you play your position right, you can even use your overload aggressively on an off angle to send a flurry of shots with obscene speed. As traditionally defensive heroes, their offensive capabilities have been massively improved. On to Bastion. The real thing that's made him strong is his grenade, which you want to be using all the time. His turret form has always been good, but with Baptiste being strong for so long and Larry having explosive entrance, there's plenty of burst heals in pocket to keep him up, which makes him a lot stronger now. Not to mention 2 drones making up for a lot of machinery on the map. Bastion and Torb are 100% the best DPS right now, but they can still lose, and especially to Sojourn and Echo, despite them being lower on the tier list. However, the playmaking ability of Bastion's turret form and the insane choke point control and zoning potential of Torb make them a crazy dynamic duo. There's already some great comments on the support tier list, so let me know what you think. Otherwise, try out these top tiered heroes for yourself in your next game.